Welcome back to this week's episode of Ghost Light. Today, I'm joined by actress, entrepreneur, and founder of Not Starving Artists, Brooke Benson. Brooke, welcome. Really glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
We are excited to have you. We are going to get to cover some of my favorite topics today: entrepreneurship, money, art, acting. So will you start, Brooke, by telling us the story behind your company, Not Starving Artists?
Yeah. So ever since I was little, I knew I wanted to be an actor. I knew I wanted to be in the theater. And so Not Starving Artists and entrepreneurship came a bit later in my life during the pandemic. Not Starving Artists was a pandemic baby. But my fascination and interest in finances started a lot earlier. So I just remember being very interested in how to manage money, and especially because I knew from such a young age that I was going to be an artist, how money was going to work for me in the real world. I was very practical minded. I developed a type A brain. Like, I don't think I'm inherently type A, but I developed a type A brain as like a trauma response to like my anxiety about an artistic career path and like the fluctuation and uncertainty of that. And so money was a huge part of that. So my parents, both being in traditional jobs, corporate life, biweekly paychecks, 401ks, they were like, good luck, kids. Like, we've got all this money advice, but it's not going to apply to you or your sister. And so just started getting in the trenches with my own money. And in college was given nary a bit of financial education, was told to save $1,000 and move to my hometown after college to save up before moving to New York or LA. Just like the least helpful money advice ever. Not a single bit about entrepreneurship and having autonomy over your finances. It was like work a survival job until you book the big gig, until you book Broadway, which again, so unhelpful. So I started figuring out how to practically manage my money as an artist, how to be able to save money on fluctuating income. And then in addition to that, feel calm and anxiety relief, even in between gigs, even with the uncertainty of money. So I realized there was this practical and this mindset piece about money. Pandemic happens, of course, and I actually have the time to start writing about it and sharing about it and realizing how important these conversations were for artistic communities. And then as I started this business, Not Starving Artists, what I realized was that there are so many people who are not artists who don't want to budget and who don't enjoy the traditional way of thinking about money and managing money and talking about money. So Not Starving Artists became a much wider net than I initially expected. So of course, I still work with so many artists and I love talking about art and money. And there are so many people who have artistic brains who are outside of the artistic way of making money that I think all of this money stuff that I'm sure we're going to get into today will apply to.
So it's sort of a finance for the non-financial brain, for the right brain thinker, the creative type, not necessarily just artists, but anybody who identifies as not being focused on analytics and all of the jargon. Is that right?
Exactly. Like, if you're not a spreadsheet person, welcome. I feel like I'm like the fringe money coach where I'm like, if you don't fit in any of these boxes, baby, there's a place for you here. Like, your brain is not a problem. Your lifestyle is not a problem. You can have financial wellness. It just might look a little different.
Well, was there, for your journey, was there sort of like a turning point where you took a sharp turn and things started to click for you? Was there a book or just a moment, a story in your life where it really turned sharply?
Yeah. So for me, the practical management of money was always something that I was inherently quite good at. Again, like, I developed this anxiety, this white knuckling that allowed me to save a lot of money and be really frugal. That all kind of bit me in the ass later on, emotionally, mindset wise, anxiety wise, because that white knuckling, you can only do that for so long before you start having panic attacks, right? Like, no number in the bank account is going to relieve anxiety that's not coming from it, where it's coming internally, right? And like the perpetual fear of uncertainty and not knowing what's coming next. So the big turning point for me was actually like when I had saved $23,000. I had $23,000 in my savings account after college, and I was subletting because I was so terrified to sign a lease. Like, the commitment of that, being like, I don't know where I'm going to be next, when the next paycheck is coming. So I didn't want to sign a full year their lease. So I was subletting, and my sublet was $750 a month in a room in a house in Sarasota, Florida, right? Like that rent,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And I remember signing my next 3 months of that sublet and having a panic attack and being like, why am I having this panic attack? Because I'm looking at this $23,000 in my savings that
Mm-hmm.
can more than afford me, more than a year of this rent. Like, why am I there is a disconnect here. And
Yeah.
so the real like switch and aha moment for me is, oh, even if as an artist, I'm able to do the practical things to save money and put money into retirement and do the good things with my money with fluctuating income, that's the first part. But then there was clearly this missing link of, I've got starving artist trauma. I figured out how to save the money, but I'm still anxious. I'm still terrified. There's something here in my mind and also in practically how I'm managing it that's fueling it. So that big shift then was, oh, I got to do some deep dive into mindset work. So I started, Jen Sincero, the You Are a Badass. I remember that being one of my first books about like mindset
Mm.
and how you view the world, your thoughts create your reality. And that kind of opened the door for me of like, oh, there's something here. So I think that was the first book that shifted me in mindset work, and then starting to apply that to all of the money stuff that I'd been working on for years before.
Wow. Um, and what do you find when you start working with clients? What are some of those mindset shifts that you first have to break through? Like, what are the most common ones you experience?
Yeah, the main big one is the fear of looking at the numbers, like the fear of the awareness. And
Mm.
so that's what fuels the avoidance. And that can come from a lot of different places. But I think what it boils down to is all or nothing thinking. That tends to be like the biggest mindset hurdle of like if I look at my numbers and if I start going down this journey of financial wellness and wanting to get my money shit together, that I'm going to have to go on a strict budget, that I'm going to have to like be real rigid with how I live my life, and I'm going to have to cut out all the fun, or I'm just going to put my head in the sand, fuck it, blackout, YOLO, do whatever I want. And there's no real middle ground. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I find is because avoidance is one of the biggest things. Avoidance is where all of our money problems stem from, because you can solve any money problem because money's just numbers. It's a beautiful thing. Money is not just numbers, there's emotions tied to it, but money is math problems, easy to solve. It's the avoidance of looking at it and deciding what you want to do that actually fuels it all. So it's what's fueling the avoidance. And usually it's all or nothing thinking, because if I look, I'm going to have thoughts, and that means I'm going to have to change something. And I don't want to have to go full throttle because that means I can't live a good life. So that's usually the first place we start of like, what do you think it means to get your money shit together? What do you think you're going to have to do to make change?
Okay. And when people come to you, I mean, do you find that are they struggling with debt? Is it struggling with income? Is it both?
Yeah, so it's kind of all across the board, but the common denominator is some bit of the thought, I don't know what I'm doing. So
Mm-hmm.
there's some catalyst that's happened usually where it's, I don't know what I'm doing. Whether that's an amount of debt where like it passes over that number where you're like, oh, this is SOS mode. This is now no longer a comfortable amount of debt that I'm accustomed to having.
Mm-hmm.
For some, it might be a large inheritance or a huge chunk of money came their way that they weren't expecting. And it's like, whoa, I don't know how to manage this. I don't know what I'm doing. It also might be an emotional trigger of maybe the finances have all been the same, but it's a conversation or something happened, like they had a panic attack and they're like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing. So the practical things that spark the I don't know what I'm doing thought, it can be wildly different. Like I've had clients who have $1 million businesses. I've had clients 5 figures in debt. And
Mm-hmm.
across the board, though, it's I don't know what I'm doing. And that's also, I think, one of the big mindset blocks that we have to work on to start is that nobody knows better than you. You are 1,000% capable. Like, what is the fuel behind the I don't know what I'm doing? I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I started to notice as I was trying to manage my businesses that I was trying to outsource a lot of my thinking to other people, to experts, and letting them tell me what was true and what was not
Yeah.
true. And especially now, in this swiping culture where everybody's giving us advice and we start assuming these ideas from strangers that are not even experts. But I really learned the lesson of, oh, I really need to think through this for myself and make a decision because, I mean, you bring up debt, right? Some people will tell you debt is the way to get wealthy, and other people will tell you avoid debt at all costs, and that's the way to build wealth. And neither of them is necessarily wrong, right?
Mhm.
Would you agree with that, or do you tend to fall on one side or the other?
No, absolutely. I don't think there's any right or wrong money decisions. I don't think there's good or bad money decisions. And just like the further I get into my life as I'm aging in my acting career, in my business, just the more I'm seeing real life examples of there is no one that knows better than you. Like our gut intuition, if you believe in a higher power, like whatever that is, your internal guidance system, whatever that is the only thing that has the ultimate truth, the only thing that you can really trust. So sometimes that's going to look like disagreeing with your CPA because
Hmm.
you also have to remember your CPA is so focused on tax liability. They're not taking in the full picture. They also don't understand the gut hit you have to take out a $10,000 loan to do this whole new thing in your business that you know is going to quadruple the income. Like you've got this feeling, you've got this vision. They're going to tell you that's insane, but you have to trust your gut. And then there's also the aspect of like taking in the advice, taking in the things that you're seeing on TikTok or whatever, but then having your own dissemination system inside of you, a way to tune in to whatever that thing is to help you make the right decisions.
Hmm.
So, like my job with my clients as their money coach is we are going to walk through every potential scenario and say, this is what this will look like. If you take out the loan, if you decide to defer paying your taxes, if you buy the house, if you rent, if you move to this city, here is what all of the financial repercussions, consequences, not good or bad, just cause and effect,
Hmm.
what all of those pathways will look like. And then you can make a decision in full understanding of what all of those different situations would look like. So it's not like, let's weigh them all out and based on what's on paper, here's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
It's look at all the options and then what in your gut feels like the right one, even if on paper it might not be the most responsible or the best or whatever it is.
Well, and so you're saying all this now, it's 2026. Tell me a little
Mm-hmm.
bit about, I mean, you have all this confidence from all this time doing the coaching, building the business. You're 6 years in. Tell me a little bit about the journey of actually getting started, because you're having to learn all the skills of coaching on top of all the skills of running a business and
Yeah.
marketing and finding leads. So tell me a little bit about that journey as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So at the very beginning, I've always been in the headspace of, and this I think came from like my baby girl frugality of I'm going to make sure something is viable and profitable before I start pouring money into it. Or
Mm,
like even with hobbies, it's like let me play with a hobby with what I have around me or with what I can get in my buy nothing group before I go and invest money into it, which I think is a great principle for doing anything new. So when I started Not Starving Artists, I started with blogging, seeing if there was traction. And then I started offering coaching and did a couple of, they weren't trial packages, they were just low cost in my first or second tier of people that I knew, starting with a handful of clients. And with those clients being like, okay, this is viable. I see what I'm doing, developing my frameworks with those clients and seeing that they were getting results. So then once I had that for like the first 6 months, then I was like, it's time to invest. And
mm,
this is where like entrepreneurship and business, I'm sure you've experienced this, right? Like when do you invest? How much to invest? That financial aspect, especially with uncertainty of I'm going to invest this amount of money in a coach or a software, or if it's like brick and mortar situation, a product, I'm going to invest this knowing and hoping that there's an ROI, making that a reality, but not having that concrete proof.
mhm,
So the first big investment that I made, and it felt so big at the time, it was a membership that was $100 a month. And it felt like the scariest investment, but it was like the first moment of, I am making this a business. This is a business membership, and I am going to meet people and figure out how to do this like the legitimate way. And one of my best friends now, we actually met in that membership, like on one of the first calls, and now we're still friends to this day, which is just like the most beautiful, I think, thing that could have come from that.
Yeah.
But that $100 felt really scary because I wasn't making $100 a month from my business yet. And then it just, from there, like I started learning new things of marketing and I started making a little more money. And then the next investment I made was a $2,000 course. And it was like money mindset, kind of the energetics, manifestation sort of thing. So I spent $2,000 on that. And then I proved to myself that within the next month, I was able to make that $2,000 back. So
Mm.
I always went in with a planned ROI. Like I was never, and I think this is where like the practical money management piece really served me in the beginning of my entrepreneurship journey of I wasn't just going to spend all of this money because it's what I should do and because I need it and because I needed people to tell me what to do and just like hoping that it was going to work. It was, I'm going to invest in this thing. If it doesn't make me an ROI, then I got to pause and I got to figure something out because I
Mhm.
want to be able to pay off these investments within a certain amount of time. So there was always a practical element of if I'm going into debt for something, I'm going to use a 0% interest rate on a credit card so I don't have to pay interest on it while I'm paying it off. And then I have a timeline of paying it off. So
Mhm.
I rode that for a while, but then it was recently within the past year or two that I started to pull away from coaching and investments to retune back into what is my gut. Like I need to stop outsourcing decision making. I can outsource other things, but I need to bring the decision making back into my internal place.
Okay. And all the while, are you continuing to pursue an acting career while you're doing all this work?
Yes, which was the most interesting part. Like as I look back on this journey, during the pandemic, it of course all acting, theater, it all went away. I mean, yes, there was virtual stuff going on. I
Yeah.
did like my first equity. I turned equity. I got my card right as the pandemic hit. So it was like April, I had planned to join the union. And at that point, we were like, oh, it's just going to be like a month, right? We didn't know that it was going to
Yeah.
go on for so long. So I took my card and I did my first virtual reading as an equity member. It's the first equity role I had. Um, and that was all great, right? But like most of it was all gone. And
Mhm.
so it was really easy for me to go full force into my business and give it all of my energy and all of my time because I wasn't really having to choose between anything. I didn't really have to choose where to put my energy during that first year, 2 years. But then, yeah, it got stickier of when I really started to fall in love with my business and feel a lot of passion for my business. Then the artist in me got really scared of like, wait, I need your time now. Like things are coming back. Like what's the balance?
Yeah.
And there were a couple of years where I felt I didn't know how to feel balance. I didn't know how to give both the time and the energy they needed. And I think this will continue to be a lifelong journey with I mean everything that I do in life, right? Of making sure that the actor in me and also like the artist and creative that's off stage in me has her time and doesn't feel threatened by the other things that I'm deciding to do, that it feels like those things are feeding into me. So I don't have like a clear answer of like, and I figured it out, and here's how I balance both perfectly.
Right.
But what I've noticed is one of the things that really helps me is I do a version of time blocking where I do basically day blocking, where I only take calls on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, Monday afternoons, Tuesday morning, Wednesday afternoons. And so I can take an audition any day I need to. Like I never am not able to take an audition. And I know that Thursday and Friday, my brain can be fully in creative actor artist brain. And those days can look however they need to. So I have a lot of like creative flexibility. I can give my brain space just silent time if it needs it. So that's something that I discovered after my first year of being in business, where I was like, I really need to make sure that that happens, that
Mhm.
I clear my calendar in that way. And then also leaning into seasonality. And this is where I'm currently in the throes of that. I know we talked right before we started recording of my podcast is taking a summer vacation this summer. And as much as I want to always be releasing a weekly podcast episode, always be consistent on Instagram, always be going to every EPA I'm right for, and always be working on my own material and being able to go to set and taking my client calls all year round, like, it's just not possible. Like, we need breaks, and there's a seasonality that I think I'm finding of maybe the podcast does take a break every single summer. And then, that's then where my brain gets breather time to work on my own, writing my own show, or like I get to take that energy and put it somewhere else. So I'm leaning into that now of what that looks like. Again, I don't have a fully formed answer, but it is constantly on my brain. And I think something I'm always going to have to be teasing with.
Do you find that your creative brain and your creative process sneaks into your business and entrepreneurial mindedness? Do they kind of play with one another, or do you keep them separate?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think at the beginning, they felt very separate, but now they are so intermingled because, like, how we do one thing is how we do everything. That's part of why I do money the way I do money, is because my artist brain, I couldn't go into money brain. Like, I needed my artist brain to be able to manage money in an artistic, fluid way that worked with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my business is the same way. Like, my brain just can't help but looking at money artistically, looking at business artistically. And then when I'm doing my art, there is also, like, I'll have ideas for money content, or I'll have like, oh, I need to do a podcast episode about this when I take acting class, I'm like, oh, this principle in acting class is completely how it is with money. I was taking class at the Barrow Group with Lee, Seth and Lee, who run the Barrow Group. Lee was teaching us one day, and she does this thing when we're kind of in our heads in a scene. And I remember I was like, it's just so hard. Like, I feel like I keep getting stuck. It's so hard. And she was like, what if it's not? And she just like waves her hand by her head. And she's like, what if it's easy? Just what if it's easy? And it was just like the simplest movement, and like crazy to think, like, I know we all joke of like, oh, just stop being anxious. Like, what if you just stopped being anxious, right? And we know that that's not true. But there was something about like, what if you just stopped telling yourself it's hard? And there was something about that then locked me into the scene where I was just able to like release all of the stuff, and I had a great next past the scene.
Yeah.
And I think about that in business too, and in money, where when I'm telling myself like, this is so hard, this is going to be so much, and I'm just like, what if it's easy? Shout outs to Lee. And I do this movement, and it releases things. So it is funny when I'm like learning and acting how it all interconnects. Do you find that in all of your ventures?
I mean, that totally goes to what it makes me think of as fixed mindset versus growth mindset. It's like we get stuck in patterns of thinking. And in problems that we solved yesterday, in the way that we solved them yesterday, and we forget, like I tell my team all the time, no person steps into the same river twice, for it is not the same river and they are not the same person.
Yes.
It's just like the world changes, and so it's important. That's the letting go, right? You can release and be like, maybe we're solving a problem that doesn't even need to be solved. And I think that, I imagine that when you're talking to your clients, that a lot of this stuff is like, you have decided this thing about money, but what if that weren't true? Or when was the last time you thought about that? Have you do you ask them those kinds of questions? Are those the aha moments that you experience?
Yeah, so much of the time, especially, so I know because we're talking to a lot of artists here, like specifically with artists, we have so many entrenched beliefs about money that we don't realize are not universal. So like, I'll have a client, especially at the beginning of our time together, they'll say something like, let me try and think of a recent example. They'll be like, oh, it's, there's no way I would be able to make $5,000 or $10,000 a month without completely giving away all of my time. And it's like, wait, is that actually true though? And then it's a moment of, well, of course it's true. What do you mean? Here's all my examples. And then it's, well, let's try and play. I like to play debate team in our brains where
Mm-hmm.
you are forced into a side, and I give you the side of like, what if that's not true though? Like, can you go and find examples and find evidence of why that is actually not true? Because we can find evidence for anything. So
Yeah.
it is always like, let's just play with that and see if we can find evidence for the latter. And if we can't, that's fine. You can stick with that belief, and that's fine by me. But if it doesn't feel good and it's limiting you, let's try and find evidence. And then we show that even if you don't fully believe that that's your reality, that that reality exists. So it like cracks the door open to, oh, maybe there is a different way of thinking about this. Specifically with artists, it's like, I'm always going to be struggling for paychecks, or it's always going to be harder for me to save, or those things of like why it's harder for me or why I won't be able to, those limits, right? It's like, what if it just wasn't there? What would that look like?
The one of the big moments for me in my journey was I had just opened our first business. It was a wine and beer bar, and in the
Mm.
beginning I did everything. I was back there, so I was working an event, and it was these real estate group, and they had guest speakers, and these were like young 20 something dudes in ball caps and like talking about all this like finance stuff that I had never heard before, never knew
Yeah.
anything about it. And they mentioned Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
And I still credit that book to kind of completely rewiring and rethinking like how I thought about finance and money. And the funny thing is now I go back and I look at it and it seems so basic and so
Sure.
simple. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow Robert Kiyosaki, but I'm not exactly
Can't
like
anymore.
a
Nope.
giant fan of the guy. But I will,
Also, just to plug a book, if you want something like Rich Dad Poor Dad, but you want something that's not written by someone you might not vibe with,
yeah.
there's an incredible book called How to Be a Rich Old Lady by
Mm,
Amanda Holden. It's an incredible investing book, kind of breaks down a lot of finance stuff and more along progressive lines if you want to like the person who wrote the book too.
yeah, right.
Just want to throw that out there.
Well, but so in that book though, the connecting it back to what you were saying is like he just talked about instead of thinking I can't afford it, think how can I afford it, and just
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's not a concept I think that's unique to him by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination, but it was the first time I really encountered it, and like you said about just mindset shift and breaking through these patterns, and it's like if you've already made the choice of like I will only be able to make X amount of dollars per month, and that's what you believe, there's no possibility of what might be. You have to open
Yeah.
yourself up to what could be and what would that look like. And that's, I think, where artists can be incredible entrepreneurs because of that creative, juice that's already within them.
Yeah.
Tell me about do any breakthroughs come to mind with that sort of, I used to think this, and then after our conversations, now I've got the ability to kind of, uh, you know, explore what I previously thought was not possible.
Yeah, and this goes back to the not thinking, can I afford this? And thinking, how can I afford this? Applying that to life. And artists, we have such amazing imaginations, but for some reason, money is like the one barrier that we're like, and that can't be fixed, right? So a lot of times the work that I do with clients is getting rid of that, looking at what's currently in front of me, looking at my reality and deciding what I can do within it. And it's
Hmm.
deciding like those big dreams of what do I actually want? What is the kind of lifestyle I desire to live? And then what would that require of my finances, but then also how I'm moving about my life. And so even if your current reality doesn't line up with what that dream is, instead of just crossing fingers for the series regular or Broadway contract or the big, becoming the new face of progressive like Flow, right?
Hmm.
It's what are those steps and what are the other creative ways that could happen. So starting with what do you want first? Like I'm thinking about one of my clients right now, she's buying a store in her current town, like a physical store. And practical elements of that. This has been her dream for a really long time, but it means pulling money, a ton of money, like a couple $100,000 out of her retirement account.
Mm.
And we played with the numbers of probably a financial planner would tell her not to do it. But with how much she's pulling out, she's able to still give herself practical safety in her retirement years, but she's also able to fulfill this dream where it's like, if this is your dream, you're gonna do it. And here are all the things then that need to happen alongside of it to make sure you still have that practical safety financially, but let's make sure you do it. Another client, I had a couple of clients buying houses. I'm not someone who says buy a house or rent. I think renting is always better just for ease of mind. But if you desire to buy a house and that's your dream, then let's figure out how to make it happen. And so, yeah, there was a client of mine who like didn't think that he would even be able to get approved for a credit card. Like his credit score was so low and he had always been not approved for credit cards. And being able to switch the thinking of, wait, oh, it's actually really easy to improve my credit score with these specific strategies. Great. And then let me apply to my first credit card. And once he showed himself that he could get approved for a travel credit card, then he was able to get approved for a loan for $1 million house and then was able to buy his dream house. So it really goes back to what is the dream? What do you want? And then what does that take to get there?
Right. Because, you know, I think for a long time, people tend to think about money as something that they need in order to fuel their lives. And I think there's a change that happens where it goes the other way. It's like, no, money is just something that I need in order to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish in life. And that seems to be like a really important shift. And we, as a society, to go to the name of your business, right, the starving artist trope, it's like, we have forced this narrative down people's throats of like, that's what you have to be in order to be a great artist. I'm curious if you found that people have had breakthroughs in their artistic career after getting their finances figured out.
Absolutely. So, because at the end of the day, great art requires risk taking, and we can take risks more easily when we have a safety net. And so, as much as we, have latched on to this image of like the tortured artist living in squalor, cutting off their ear, drinking themselves into oblivion. Like we have this idea that like that struggle is what creates the great art. And it's not true. I mean, you can just take your own personal self. Like I know when I am anxious, I don't do good work in the audition room. Like I need to be chill, calm, know my rent's paid, know I have a full life outside of this casting room, and that's when I do my best work. And we can all just take our own personal experiences of that to prove it. I had a client who, a couple of clients who were actually able to move to New York City from their hometowns or where they were during the pandemic to be able to start auditioning and get plugged back into the artistic community because they had a handle on their finances and because they actually could see in the bank account, I'm going to be able to survive in a higher cost of living city and I'm 3 months ahead on bills. So when I come to the city, I'm not going to be immediately panicked about getting a job. I have a little buffer room. So to even just start getting plugged into their artistic life. I had another client who was able to take a lower paying like summer stock gig where she was understudying Maria in The Sound of Music, which is one of her dream roles. She was able to take that because she knew that she was okay financially. I've even talked about my personal experiences with this when I started to feel real financial stability. I mean, that's when I booked my first gig post-pandemic. I was able to book commercials. Like I booked my first movie recently. Like artistic momentum follows financial stability. So you can find evidence of it everywhere. But I would also say to anyone listening to this, if you're finding that your brain is arguing with that fact, just like start clocking your internal emotional state when you're engaging in artistic practices, whether it's auditions, interviews, or just your own creative practice, and see what happens.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a little like money and auditions follow the same pattern, which is like when you really want it doesn't come to you.
It's so annoying.
And when you don't need it, it's like, oh, this is all it's all so easy. What is going on there? Well, so tell me, if I'm an artist who's trying to get this all figured out and I'm not using spreadsheets and budgets, what am I doing?
Yeah, you're using something that I call the money flow method. So, the money flow method is bank account organization. It's how your money's flowing through your accounts versus trying to focus on the numbers and the budgeting and the cutting back. So, when I talk about the money flow method versus budgeting, the first thing that I say is that spreadsheets and budgets are like a middleman. We want to
Mm.
cut out the middleman and have everything happening directly in your bank accounts. Because so often when people come to me, they're like, I've tried budgeting, I've tried spreadsheets, and like, even when I feel like I'm sticking to it, like the numbers aren't matching what's in the bank account. Like, there's always less in the bank account or the numbers aren't adding up. So, cutting out that middleman is not only going to like relieve your anxiety, but it's going to make things easier just from a practical standpoint. So, how the money flow method works is you have multiple bank accounts open that sections off your money. So, it starts with three basic checking accounts. So, one is called your landing strip. That's where all of your freelance and fluctuating income piles up throughout the month.
Hmm.
You have one called your firm spending, and that's bills, auto pays, anyway, anything that's automatically getting pulled from your account, rent, health insurance, all of that. And then the third one is flex, and that's groceries, gas, entertainment, anything you're like swiping or tap to paying your card throughout the month.
Hmm.
You're managing your money on a monthly cycle. So you let your money pile up in your landing strip, and then at the top of the month, you separate it into your firm and flex accounts, and any surplus goes into getting 3 months ahead on bills. That's a savings account, investments, debt payoff, etc. And so what that allows you to do is it allows you for a full 30 days to just be in the moment, spending that free playground bank account, right? That's your
Hmm.
flex spending, knowing your rent's taken care of, knowing your bills are taken care of. And then your fluctuating income piles up throughout the month. So then at the next top of the month, then you do the same exact process. So this is giving you a more hands-off way of managing your money while also giving you a much clearer view of what you spend in a month and what you make in a month, especially when your income is fluctuating.
I see. Because
Mhm.
you're basically having the income in one bucket, the spending's happening in two separate buckets, and so then
Mhm.
you're seeing what's the one versus the other two. And
Yes.
immediately I start translating it to business terms of like, oh, these are my fixed expenses versus my variable expenses. I love
Yes,
it.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
great.
And I say if you have a business, right? If you aren't just operating with like freelance income, you have a separate entity, you have two separate money flows because they're two separate entities. I
Hmm.
also see a lot of business owners tend to commingle of like the income in the business feels like their income in their personal life, where it's like, no, your owner's draw or your salary,
Hmm.
that's your personal income. And there has to be clear separation and delineation. I think money organization is the most underrated financial tool. We go straight to budgeting. We go straight to a spreadsheet. We go straight to trying to like math our way around, where just separating it, separating income and spending, separating business and personal is going to do more for your awareness about your finances than any like, all right, time to strap on the boots and like get in this rigid management cycle. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to do so much more for you than that.
I've read so many business books that will talk about budgeting as much more of a it's like an idea. It's like this is what we think, but at the end of the day, you have to spend the money where you have to spend the money. And the
Hmm.
budget is just a map. It's just a
Yes.
best guess to get us where we think we want to go.
Hmm.
But if in the moment or when things are actually happening, you have to spend more in order to get the job done, you have to
Yeah.
do that. Um,
I am so glad that you brought this up because this is exactly it. Budgeting doesn't allow, or even just like the headspace around budgeting, doesn't allow for that kind of day-to-day, week-to-week flexibility that creatives and business owners require. Because like you said, like if you need to, like I had to hire a lawyer recently. Like I
mhm,
didn't have a choice. I had to hire the lawyer. That
yeah.
money had to get spent. If you are, like I had a client who could work as a local hire in LA and New York, and all of a sudden an LA local hire job came through and she was paying for her own flights, and she was getting paid for the gig there. But all of a sudden, within like a 2-week notice, she had to
Mhm.
buy flights to LA. And so, and even, like our months can look different within the month. Like you're on
Yeah.
set one day or you're traveling, or even just like you have a really bad mental health week and you have to eat out more. Like that kind of stuff just happens. And what are you going to do? Like not get yourself what you need, not buy the flights. And so what the money flow method allows, it's built to absorb that kind of fluctuation.
Yeah.
It's built to give you a full picture of your money so you're not locked into categories, and it doesn't make you feel guilt and start the shame cycle of I fucked it up, I did it bad, I
hmm
failed.
hmm Yeah, because then that just locks you into further fear of looking at the statements, further fear of
Exactly.
keeping close eye on things, and then you're back in that sort of vicious cycle. The
Exactly.
the thing that came up for me was like if I was advising somebody, and I don't, so don't take this as anything. I'm just coming up with this on the spot. But but I think about just for my own journey of being like, oh, you're trying to make the right financial decision for like today that has the best effect as far down the line as possible. And it's like
Mhm.
that starts super small, right? It like starts when you start thinking, I'm going to buy this non-perishable item in bulk because it's cheaper, even though it's not cheaper today, right? Like
Mhm.
it's more expensive today, but I won't have to buy it for the next 3 months and it'll sit in my pantry. And I've built up, like you said, these shock
Mhm.
absorbers. So this decision doesn't have any effect
Mhm.
on my daily life. And
Mhm.
in the long run, it's going to help free up more money to spend in different places. And that's like a
Yeah.
super small example, right? But it's like that's the argument for investing your money is like I'm making
Yeah.
a choice today that's going to set me up well, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Um
And that exactly, like that energy, I think is something that we all need to be way more intentional about cultivating, because
mhm,
our culture and our society has really gotten insidious and sticky with like marketing to us in the day-to-day element of like
mhm,
what's going to be the least friction for you. Like how can we bleed you of just a few dollars every single day so that you
yeah.
don't even notice it? And I just also want to say, like, there's systemic shit at play here, and personal finance is a band-aid for it. So I hope that my job becomes irrelevant in the next 10 years. That is
Mm.
my hope. We've got a socialist sweep, like, let's get universal health care, let's get universal basic income for artists, right? But personal finance being a band aid, we need to be aware of these little things that companies are doing, like Klarna, like these
Mhm.
buy now, pay later things. I literally saw an ad on the subway the other day that said small amounts are cuter. Of like these small amounts that you pay over time, like it's cuter. You can do it. Like $5 won't hurt you too much today,
Yeah.
but enough of those is really going to hurt you in the long term. So it's long term pain and long term gain that I think we need to have our eyes on more and more intentionality around.
Yeah, and I mean that's the inverse of what I was just telling you. It's like you're
Mhm.
making the easier choice today, which is going to set you up for a harder choice tomorrow. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and it's like, and that's where, for me, finances, it's so incredibly complex if you want to get in the weeds and you want to geek out on it. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, it boils down to spend money on things that come back to you, that return,
Yeah.
and don't spend money on things that don't, or control the expenses that are just going away forever, and know that you know this is a one-time expense that I'm never going to see again, and
Mm.
I'm going to enjoy it. It's a little treat.
Yeah. I liken it to like the health world, the health, nutrition, fitness world,
Mm,
where we know the basic things that improve our health, which is, I mean, eat less, exercise more. We know there's nuance there, but it really is move more, eat
yeah.
food that fuels you, and sleep well and lower your stress. And those are not like the sexy things. And those are the things that you need to see days and weeks and months compounding to like see the physical results. And it's a lot easier to get to feel like the hit of dopamine. It's like I intermittent fasted or like all these
Hmm.
supplements and I'm doing the things. And money can be the same exact thing of like, ooh, like let me get into the weeds with the stock picking. And there's this level of like stress and involvement that makes makes us feel like we're doing better things for our finances when it's really just look at your numbers, make sure you're spending less than what's coming in overall on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis,
Hmm.
invest in basic index funds, target date funds inside of retirement accounts. And that's it. And then go live your life and make your art. But like, it is like our anxiety loves to latch on to those finicky little nitpicky things, or those are the things that make it feel overwhelming.
Yeah, and the overwhelming is the thing that keeps you from getting started, right? It's like
Exactly.
build the habits in small ways first. You know,
Yeah.
if you're eating fast food 3 times or 5 times a week, like
Yeah.
don't immediately go to I'm only going to eat Whole Foods Whole 30 for the next year. It's like no, let's start with like introducing a banana first and
Yep.
just like consistently have the banana, and then let's move on to the 30-minute walk, and then let's go to the weighted
Yeah.
vest. Like build on your
Yeah.
successes over time,
Mm.
as opposed to try to tackle the whole thing all at once. I mean, that's such an
Yeah.
important concept for finance too. But
Right.
Brooke, I want to spend the last couple of minutes that we have here talking a little bit about sort of the broader arts ecosystem, because I
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time thinking about how artists fit in and make money in a
Mm.
bigger beast. And so I was curious, if we want to have healthier arts organizations, what do you think has to change besides personal finance?
Mm. Oh, I mean, so many things. Well, I think, and this goes to like quite a large, high level view where, like I was saying before, like universal healthcare and eventually universal basic income and having social safety nets. I think like even outside of arts organizations, just as a society, I think that is what is required in order for arts organizations, which tend to be the first thing that fiscally gets pulled or undervalued in times of crisis. Like that's the unnecessary, and I'm using hard air quotes here because we know it's not unnecessary. We know it's like the lifeblood of our society, but that's the first thing that gets pulled. So I think social safety nets on a large scale is the main thing that needs to change to have solvent and thriving arts industries and arts organizations.
Hmm.
And then I also think artists on the individual level, like uh, not that I'm saying that kind of stuff can't happen at the individual level. That's collective organizing. But I also think all of us going into our own artistic souls and deciding like what feels good, what do I want to say no to? Like how do I create a sustainable life for myself while the industries are shaking out, while we're fighting for the stuff that makes these industries again viable, so that you can still live a good life and not be reliant on the structures of these industries in the capitalist structure that might be crumbling soon. Like, who knows? We need to find that artistic fulfillment and that daily artistic practice for ourselves in alignment with our morals and our values in the meantime, as we find how we plug into the new landscape. Like, I don't even have a clear vision of where our arts industries are headed. Do you have thoughts on this question?
Oh, do I have thoughts?
I'm sure you
Yes,
do.
I do have thoughts. But I have a lot more questions too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the biggest questions that I come around to is I think about the creative ecosystem, and I think about the amount of capital flowing through it. And the biggest question that I wonder is, are we tracking how much of this revenue, so in Brooke Benson, that fluctuating top bucket, how
Mm-hmm.
much of that is actually creating sustainable artistic careers? Because it feels like, even from this conversation, that in order to make it, in order to be a not starving artist, you've got to start having multiple streams of income, and that
Yeah.
top bucket is going to fluctuate a bunch because it's extremely inconsistent, and
Mm-hmm.
there are no careers in the sense of like I got a job as a resident, actor. I got a job at a at a nonprofit arts organization where 30%, 50% of my time is painting, and then the other 50% is teaching. It just seems like the nonprofit world is primarily about getting the thing made and keeping the nonprofit alive.
Hmm. Yes. And I fully agree with you in like the multiple streams of income thing right now in where we're sitting in the arts. It is kind of the thing. And as
Yeah.
much as I wish that wasn't the case and I wish our industries were different right now, and I want to be the person that says like we all can have full-time artistic careers and make that happen. I'm just not seeing that right now, again,
Yeah.
with where our structures are at. And so I think this is also about switching in our brains what it means to be a full-time artist.
Hmm.
So my definition of full-time artistry is that I'm living a full-time artistic lifestyle. It has nothing to do with the percentage of income that comes from my literal art. But
Hmm.
also then deciding like my business is a form of my creativity and my art. And as artists, we are meant to, and these are all thoughts that help me support that thought. So I don't just feel like a failure for not being a full time, full income making artist all of the time here in the city. It's how am I living a full life that fuels my art,
Yeah.
so that I can feel good with how whatever the income split is of what's paying me. And it might be bigger one month in one category and another, like it might fluctuate. I just think we need to hold our definitions and our labels a lot more loosely and just be like, what does an artistic lifestyle look like for me?
Yeah, but do you think maybe is there a danger in the hustle culture of that? And then I guess the broader question there too is then can we ever get to um, making really incredible artwork that's worth consuming when
Mm-hmm.
everyone's constantly running around, spending their time at auditions that are uncompensated
Mm-hmm.
and then when they get a job, the rehearsals, that used to be 2 months are now down to 6 weeks and like I don't know. I appreciate what you're saying because I
Yeah.
think you're right that that's the way the system works now, and what good
Mm-hmm.
is it railing against the system? But
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's the way to create the best art.
Sure. And I think and this is where I think every artist specifically is going to have a different relationship with this, where some artists really thrive in constraint. Like if you are given a full day to to play with your art, nothing gets done because it's too much space. There's no constraint. Where
Hmm.
some people are able to, write novels with just 1 hour in the morning, and there's something about only having that 1 hour and making the most of it that gets the novel out of them. I tend to fall in the first category where like I don't like as many constraints. So I totally agree. And part of why like I'm having to figure out in my own life, how do I give myself more space and time and pull out of the hustle culture? And this is like, I think you're 100% right in art that is worth consuming and worth making. It needs time and it needs space. And we need more structures for artists to be able to make bad shit and then
Hmm.
be able to make good shit. Like, we can't just, I think, and this, we're going to get into meta here, but like the freelance model, I think is on one hand really lovely because it's given artists more access to different kinds of jobs and not just one artist that is, taking a full salary for all of the different projects, sure, but the freelance model also requires every single project and every single thing to be brilliant. There is no room to fuck it up. Like in corporate,
Hmm.
I was talking to my dad. He works in like ag marketing, and his job, he takes big swings with huge chunks of money, and sometimes they're a hit and sometimes they're a miss, but he gets paid either way. And
Yeah.
that's not how it is for artists. And so I think this is where it comes back to like the more I sit with this exact question, I fall in collective organizing and making sure that we really are fighting for social safety nets, rent stabilization, lower cost of living, subsidized housing, again, basic income, healthcare, because all of those things are what is going to give us more time and space because our society right now requires artists to do the hustle and to put a lot of time and effort into making the kind of money that's required for that time and space. Now, I also want to say there is something to removing the thought. Like I was saying, like, what if it's easy? What if it doesn't have to be that way?
Hmm.
There are ways to make the kind of money that doesn't require that kind of hustle, there are roads and paths into that I think artists need to be specifically focused on. Like whenever I do workshops at colleges, I always say, like, you should not be looking at any job that pays you less than $25 an hour.
Hmm.
That's not minimum wage, but for you, that is your minimum wage based on where you're going to live and the time that you are giving. So
Hmm.
it's even just like removing any options that are not going to put you on those paths, to remove any of that, like hustle, wasted time, etc., not being paid what you're worth. While again, we're fighting for collective change here.
But I'm thinking back to my last equity contract, and I don't
Tell me.
know. Well, I'm just saying I don't know that I was making $25 an hour on my.
And that's exactly it, isn't it? That's the kicker. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is, again, like, I want to, like, the easy thing is fighting for theaters to pay more and for everyone to become equity so that we are a fully unionized workforce. But theaters are drastically underfunded. And if we think about that, but then also the patrons who are coming to the theaters, if we're talking high cost of living, people have less discretionary income to come to the theater and support those ticket sales. So we can't even fault the theaters. We have to fault way at the top, right? The
Mm,
oligarchical system that's at play,
right.
and making sure that people have the money to be able to spend on something as frivolous, again, hard quotes, as the arts.
All right. Just to be devil's advocate here,
Do it.
is there a scenario where universal basic income backfires and makes the art th- less intense, less do we get lazy with our arts because we now don't need the job, we don't need the hustle?
I have a hard time believing that artists would get lazy about their art if they had all the time and space. Like, all of us are artists because we can't not. Like,
Mm,
there's something in us that is always pulled to it. So that's not to say that, like, there wouldn't be problems with universal basic income. I mean, there are problems with universal health care, with quality of care and wait lists. Like, we know that that's a thing. Is what we're doing right now working? No. So, like, might as well try something different. But with universal basic income, I think, oh, it's that thing of when people are removed from the hustle, when they don't have to anymore, they go back to crafting, they go back to that creative aspect. And so I have to believe that when you give people enough space, I mean, we see the Nepo babies who don't have to worry about it. They all go to the arts. They're all doing creative things, right? And
right.
if they're not doing that as a career, like, they are just vibing in their creativity, whatever that realm is. So I have a hard time seeing a reality where artists themselves and the creativity goes away. Now, the business model of the arts industries with universal basic income, that might shift a lot, but
Mm.
also everything else would be shifting in that realm. So I don't know what that would end up shaking out like, but creativity I don't think would be going anywhere.
All right, so if you only had one piece of advice that you got to give a creative early in their career, what would you tell them?
One piece of
One
advice.
piece.
Oof.
Change their life.
Okay, I'm caught between two. Let me decide which one.
Okay.
Um, in addition to learning the basics of finance and looking at your numbers, the one that I think is the most life-changing is explore all of your curiosities, regardless of what you think the end goal is going to be. So whatever you're excited about outside of your creative practice,
Mm.
start pursuing it, start taking steps in those directions without the thought of, I'll turn this into a side hustle, or this will be a stream of income, or this will be my parallel career, or what if this becomes my, like, none of that, just what's exciting and what's curious, and just continue walking down those paths.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Stay curious.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and
Yes, and.
and the sort of the opposite of the this has to be the only thing in your life advice from the MFA classes, like, you don't have a backup plan. It's like,
No.
explore everything all the time
Yeah.
as you
Also,
find curiosity.
MFA programs are starting to change their tune on that. Like, I will come and do workshops in MFA programs, and a lot of them are saying streams of income,
Mm,
curiosities, like, start pursuing other things. So it's actually, the narrative is changing.
good. Good. Well, speaking of the narrative changing, thank you, Brooke, for all that you do. Thanks for being on the podcast. Will
Thank you
you
for having me.
drop some marketing so people can find you if they're listening to the episode?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Not Starving Artists, plural. You can also find me online, notstarvingartist.com. I do have an online course called Cashed Up Creative. I give away the first module for free. It's called Finances 101. It's all the basics of banks, credit, retirement, investing, all of that stuff that you can get totally for free. Let's make that education. Let's get that out into the hands of the artists and the people. So you can find that on Instagram and also my website. I also have one-on-one coaching available. And again, all of those details are on Instagram and on my website as well. After the summer break, I'll be back with my weekly podcast episodes. The Not Starving Artist podcast is on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. You can find it all those places. During the summer vacation, go back and get yourself an education. We've got 165 episodes backlogged, so you've got lots to binge before we come back in the fall.
Love it. Brooke, amazing. Thank you for being a guest. I really appreciate having you. I hope that you'll come back on sometime and we can have more conversations about this.
Yeah, maybe when the industry starts to shake out, we can have new conversations about what's going on.
Absolutely. Things are going to change. They'll change.
Exactly.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. And thanks, everybody, for coming to Ghostlight.
Thank you.